Welcome back to the Theology of the Buddy podcast, a podcast for Catholics who love tradition and want more of it. You're listening to episode 43. My name is Chris, and I'm joined by my wonderful, fabulous, beautiful co-hosts, Mike and Brooke.
Hello there.
Hello, how's it going?
Hello, Brooke.
Hello,
you look lovely today.
Thank you.
Yes, I do. Oh, you meant Brooke.
He said hello, Brooke. He's desperate for your attention, Chris. You got to give it to him.
Compliments. Give me compliments.
Thank you. I don't do very well taking compliments.
All right. Well, friends, let's chat. What's up? What's new? What's happening? What's crack-a-lackin'?
Well, just before we started recording, our poor little 4.5-year-old had a bit of a nosebleed, and it was messy.
Everywhere.
It was just blood everywhere. She's fine. It's just because it's the winter here. It's really, really dry. There's a high chance that she probably had her nose shoved, her finger shoved up her nose, and kids be kids. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Blood everywhere.
She's
though, right?
fine. Yeah, she's fine.
Yeah.
She's fine. So, pretty sure it was a spiritual attack, but yeah, she's fine. She's been blessed. Dad took care of that.
Yeah.
Yep. Because we were just about to start recording. Like, we were just on the cusp of like, all right, let's do this. And then suddenly Mike's like, we gotta go.
Yeah.
Well, first it was like, oh, this is not good. Oh, this is worse than I thought. Mike, you gotta come up here.
Yeah. Well, that's crazy. Anything else besides that? You guys are just getting over a cold.
Yeah, we were sick for a week.
Our whole family was. So, yeah, rough times in our house.
Hard times.
We're back. We're ready to rumble.
Yeah, it was not coronavirus.
That's good.
Just normal virus.
Yeah. Regular, plain old cold virus. How about you, man? What's going on?
Not much, man. Like, I just started the consecration to Saint Joseph yesterday, and I don't know, like, are you guys familiar with it? Like, it's been going around Catholic internet, like Twitter and social
I've seen it pop up a few places for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, like, I love Saint Joseph, and that devotion has grown over the course of, I would say, my Carmelite vocation. Saint Teresa of Avila loved Saint Joseph. Like, everything was for Saint Joseph. And I'll be honest with you, I think I had a lot of hang-ups about Saint Joseph. And like, I went to St. Joe's High School, and, everybody would, say, St. Joseph, pray for us. But nobody had an actual devotion to him. And there was never anything that was concrete that I could kind of sink my teeth into. And, yeah, but as I began my Carmelite vocation, secular Carmelite vocation, that desire to know Saint Joseph began to grow. And, but when Father Calloway came out with this consecration to Saint Joseph, I was like humming and hawing. I was like, do I want to add like another devotion and another thing to my regimen of prayers and stuff every day when I'm already like struggling to get done my Carmelite duties and stuff as a new dad? And, Mike, you would probably appreciate this because I watched there was like a promotional video that came out, and right off the hop, it was a quote from St. Peter Julian Amard about St. Joseph.
Your boy.
My boy. So I was like, okay, like that might be a bit of a sign. And then, so I bought the book, but I was like, okay, I'll do this, but maybe I won't put it on Julie and say, you should do it too. Maybe I should just do it for myself. And then I open up the book and it talks about the different consecration prayers that you do at the end of the 33-day preparation. And the end prayers include one by St. Peter Julian Amard and then one by St. Alphonsus Liguori, which is Julie's boy. So it was like, okay, I'm taking this as a sign. Like, okay. So I was like, okay, Julie,
that's awesome.
You're going to need to do this. Yeah.
That's great.
It's kind of funny because like a few summers ago, we went to Marytown, and which is north of Chicago. It's the National Shrine of St. Maximilian Kolbe. And they've got first-class relics that line the walls. Mike and I got to go there last year. And but
it's awesome.
It's a great place. And on the one side, there is like a reliquary filled with like 6 or 7 relics. And St. Peter Julian Amard and St. Alphonsus Liguori are neighbors in this reliquary too. So like when Julie and I saw that a few years ago, we're like, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah. I remember you showed me that pairing when we went there.
Yeah. Right. It's cool. It's cool.
About the consecration, I actually first saw it a while back because I was looking up that art piece of St. Joseph. Do you remember that, Brooke?
St. Joseph, Terror of Demons.
Yeah. I was actually considering buying this print, and I still might. But it's just like a really nicely done St. Joseph looking like manly, strong. He's got a walking staff, and he's just kind of casually leaning on it. And the bottom of it is going through the dragon's head underneath his feet.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Yeah. Father Calloway did a number of pieces commissioned.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And actually it's kind of cool. He had, that one done. He had one of the Assumption of St. Joseph, which, I mean, it's not a well-known devotion, but it is in piety and has been a small T tradition. Mm-hmm. And then there's one that he did with like the patrons of St. Joseph, which I think I'm actually going to pick up. And it has like all the saints that really pushed for devotion to him. And so it's got St. Peter Julian Amard and St. Teresa of Avila. And I'm like, you can't get more applicable to me than that, right?
Yeah.
So I love it.
I also picked up a St. Joseph devotional book I'm planning to go through for Lent. Brooke got me this book many eons ago, and I started it and then forgot about it. It's called Joseph's Way.
Who's it by?
Devin Shad.
Devin Shad.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's a book of like daily reflections on fatherhood, using the biblical patriarchs as models. So Joseph, but also going back to Abraham and Moses, and drawing the lessons out of Scripture for how to be a good father and husband.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Because
this book's great so far.
Isn't that
the plan? Is to finish it for Lent.
So yeah, I was just gonna say, like, wasn't like the fact that he goes through the patriarchs that relates to the litany of Saint Joseph, right? Because in the litany of Saint Joseph, you say, "Light of the patriarchs" or "Light of patriarchs, pray for us." It's always been something that I've never really understood that title. I'm looking forward to learning about it with this consecration.
Light of the patriarchs. I've heard that, but I hadn't thought about it in relation to this book.
Yeah. Pretty sweet. So, moving on. So we've had a few weeks of some fantastic engagement, and some great people have been reaching out to us. I can't name everyone by name, but I want to give a particular shout out to our friend Tim. Tim reached out to us through Instagram, and he and I have been chatting over at via email. You can reach us at theologyofthebuddy@gmail.com. And he and I have been chatting, and it's been great. And so huge shout out to that guy. He's been an incredible encouragement. Another quick shout out. Today, featured on the New Liturgical Movement website, our hometown boy, Tate Pumphrey, has been has been featured.
Represent.
Yeah. So Dr. Peter Kwasniewski did an interview with Tate. Tate is a composer and a fantastic dude. He writes a lot of new hymns, but are like obviously super traditional and really good. Yeah, he's written a lot of great stuff. And we featured him during our masses sometimes, and for like the opening or closing hymns, and yeah, they're just really well done. So we'll be sure to include the link to that interview in our show notes. I've already talked to him like months ago, and I said, hey, we want to have you on the podcast. So you should look forward to that sometime this season. Yeah. The last thing I want to say is I have been reaching out to a number of people who follow us via Instagram. But I've been asking for people to share if they have any prayer requests or whatnot. So please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to know if you have any prayer requests. So just DM us on Instagram at Theology of the Buddy, Facebook, Theology of the Buddy, email theologyofthebuddy@gmail.com. In particular, though, I do want to give a particular request right now to anyone who's listening. There is someone on Instagram. Her handle is The Future is Family. She's kind of a newish trad, and her husband has contracted brain cancer. And it has been a absolute uphill battle for them in the last year, really. It's been pretty intense, and like he just came down. His name is Michael, the husband. Michael just came down with shingles, and now it's going into his eye, so he is in like very like a ton of pain, and like they've got a number of children, and it's just a lot. So if you would offer up the Moss family, I think that's how you pronounce it, especially for Michael and for his healing, that would be absolutely appreciated. And if you guys are listening, Moss family, we love you. We believe in you. You guys are doing amazing things as a family, and you're such a example of holiness and just such a good holy marriage. So yeah, be assured of our prayers. Okay. So last thing I want to say, a listener reached
I don't believe
out.
you.
Yeah, you know me all too well. So before we get into today's topic, which we're getting into the Querida Amazonia, the document issued by Pope Francis as a reflection on the Synod of the Amazon. Before we get into our discussion on that document, we had one of our listeners, I won't name them for obvious reasons, but I just love this, and it made me laugh and bust a gut and healed my wounded heart a little bit. So if you have listened to the Novus Ordo versus TLM podcast, you know that I shared in that I had at one time in my life, many years ago, rapped a responsorial psalm in Mass, and I still feel guilty to this day for doing that. But he wrote in, this person wrote in, you mentioned that you still have regrets to this day over things that you did before you knew better, and I can absolutely relate. I was about 6 months post-baptism and gave the announcements at Life Teen Mass as Miss Cleo, the old TV psychic. Yep, that included cross-dressing.
No.
That is only
No
one of
way.
several things that I still look back and just shudder over.
Oh no.
No.
I hope there were no pictures.
Oh gosh. Oh, well, there'll be pictures at the general judgment. Oh, it hurts.
They're just gonna throw down the pictures and they'll be like, "What was that?"
He'll be like, guilty. It was all me.
Oh man.
Miss Cleo, thank you for your email.
Oh man.
That hurts. That hurts.
So I think that's a perfect intro to what we're discussing
Speaking of
today.
things that hurt, reading Querida Amazonia.
You know what hurts more, guys?
What?
Reading it twice.
Yeah.
Like I did. I read it twice because I needed to make sure that I wasn't blinded by, I don't know, interior vomit or something. And I just wiped that away, try it again.
Wow.
And no, it was the same. It's just the document.
It's
That's
difficult. It's a difficult read.
It was really difficult.
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna try to take a balanced approach as well as we can.
Absolutely.
Despite Brooke's graphic intro,
I could have said something else.
Yeah.
Was that you being charitable there?
Yep.
Okay. Let's cut her mic now.
Wait, no, we don't want to cut you, Mike. Come on.
I love you.
That's sweet, guys. Okay.
First, Mike suggests we drop him. Now he suggests we cut him. Like, come on.
We will not do either. We need you.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of reactions already to this document, and there's definitely huge range of reactions from celebration, this document's great, to it's just using weaponized ambiguity to sneak in all the stuff that it supposedly doesn't do. And a lot of people are really mad about the people on the opposite spectrum of reaction. I've seen a ton of people saying, "Oh, look at these trads. They're so mean. They'll complain about anything Pope Francis says. He writes an amazing document where he defends the priesthood, and the trads are just like trying to find fault anywhere." So that is all to say that we're going to have some criticisms for the document. We're going to try to back them up and be objective and not just be bad trads.
No.
We're going to hate on the document. We're not exactly going to be ripping Pope Francis apart, right? Maybe.
That'd be terrible.
First cutting Mike, now ripping apart the Pope. Like, gross.
That escalated really quickly. Wow, you're so violent.
First it starts off with your child getting beaten in the face by a demon. Then
it was just a nosebleed. It's dry. It's winter air. It's just dry.
It's winter air. It's dry.
Winter air. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So, like, for me, like, overall, reading through the document, I had a hard time grasping in my mind why it was necessary to write this document and to have a synod around things in the Amazon. And I still don't really fully understand, like, the Holy Father kind of gets into, like, he wants to kind of help the world really appreciate what the Amazon has to offer, and goes on for pages. But at the end of it, I am no more in love with the place and whatnot than I was when I started. No,
that is a really curious element for sure. You know, the whole, like, huge emphasis on talking about the Amazon region, talking about the environment, talking about the problems that people are having that are forced out of their homes and stuff like that. There's some kind of Catholic content there where they're encouraging he's encouraging Catholics to have concern for the plight of these people and be upset about the injustices and work to help them.
Yep.
But it's curious why we needed to go on this journey with like Amazon poetry and like elaborate descriptions of the forest and the cultures that like we can't emphasize enough. It's incredibly long, this part, just to get to a very, very simple set of concrete recommendations.
I agree. Like when I was reading it, all I could think of was, this isn't something I would normally expect from, a synod, from, a document at this length or whatnot. It's something you would picture in your head, like, oh, Pope Francis is meeting such and such a person. Pope Francis is meeting such and such a person to coordinate or aid or whatever, some kind of exchange to send missionaries to help people. And that would be the end of it. You know what I mean? Like it might be a brief news story, but it wouldn't normally be something that would be this drawn out process. If the aim was just to help poor people, which is obviously a good thing to do. We want to help all poor people. We want to help all those disenfranchised and whatnot. And we obviously don't want our planet to die. We live here. But yeah, it's just kind of weird.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. As I was reading through it, I constantly was asking the question, like, if we really want to help the people in the Amazon, is writing an apostolic letter really, really what we need to be doing to make that happen? And like, I was like, we're worried about these different corporations, for example, coming in and taking over, the lands of the Amazon, these big corporations who are just hungry for money and blah, 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 and forcing these people out of those regions and into the, the outskirts of the cities, and which leads to them going into poverty and, potentially human trafficking and things like this. I'm like, you're throwing paper at a problem that's like a legitimate problem. If the Holy Father, if any person of real goodwill cared about those people being pushed to the margins legitimately, then like he should be getting in his plane, using his greenhouse gases, or not, whatever you want to call it, and flying to the Amazon and like meeting with government leaders and meeting with these corporations and saying, stop. He needs to be more of a face that defends real people instead of being like, I wrote a thing over here. Hope you read it. Like
now to clarify, in this document, are there concrete, specific things listed that must happen?
Definitely not. There are a couple concrete suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
They're very basic things like we need to pray for vocations.
Yep.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I thought was a really good point was he recommended for all the countries that include parts of the Amazon that the missionaries coming out of their seminaries need to go to the Amazon.
Yeah.
More of them.
Absolutely.
And I think it was in a footnote that he added some detail there, but I thought it was like a correctly identified problem that so many people being trained and sent out as missionaries from these countries are going to Europe and, going to, and not to like accuse them too directly, but to more comfortable places to be a missionary rather than their own backyard that's lacking priests.
And some of those locations are like legitimately dangerous locations. Not exactly because of the people that live there, though sometimes it has happened. We have heard of things like that happening with particular tribes that, are isolated, but the terrain itself is dangerous, so I understand why some people would be afraid to actually go there. But yeah, that is a concrete thing that should be done, like to send missionaries there and aid them, in getting there.
Yeah. The one thing that did concern me, though, with regards to that was it was talking about the formation of said missionaries, and it was, there was some suggestions there that I just didn't feel comfortable with regards to basically training them to, I don't know what the word is, like to understand.
It's around enculturation, right?
Yeah. But like a weird understanding of enculturation where it's like more on the syncretist level of things, right? That's kind of where I had a lot of my concerns through the document, was that there was in that document 19 references to enculturation, but you could almost replace it with syncretize, and it would have the same meaning almost in the document.
I mean, what I found with all these references to enculturation was it's kind of like a lot of the documents of Vatican II, where they're arguably meant to be orthodox. You can read them in an orthodox way, but they're also ripe for abuse. And we've seen that abuse happen. And I don't think it's paranoid to think that this document also is going to be abused. In fact, we've already seen interpretations of Querida Amazonia that are, quite frankly, abusing these vague parts of it.
Do you have any example of that?
Yeah, for sure. We actually just watched, and maybe this is what brought demons into our house to cause a nosebleed. But we watched Father James Martin's response to Querida Amazonia. But yeah, his final point in that video was talking about how, Pope Francis stopped short, and that's always the word, he stopped short of allowing the viri privati, the married priests and women deacons. And I love how they use that phrase, stop short, as if he's on the path to going there. He just stopped short of it. Maybe next document we'll get there. It's the clear implication, right? And
that's kind of what's being kind of toted by, what's his name, Cheney, the one guy in the Vatican that was saying that, is it Cardinal Cheney? I don't remember. Do you know who I'm talking about? No?
Dick Cheney?
No, I don't know what his name is. It's like Czeny. But yeah, he was saying like all of this stuff is still on the table. Like this document hasn't closed anything. All of these things like the viri privati and women priesthood and blah blah blah, it's still on the table. The conversation isn't closed.
And that's kind of where I was going with the statement from Father James Martin because I didn't finish his sentence there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
He said that Pope Francis stopped short of doing these things, but he includes the final document from the synod, proposes everyone to read it, and doesn't condemn it in any way, asks the bishops of the Amazon to implement it, and hopes that it will enrich everyone. That document is the document that proposes women deacons and viri probati. He did not condemn it. He just didn't explicitly back it up. He very vaguely promoted it, though, at the very start of Querida Amazonia.
Yeah. Yeah. And that
he presents the document Querida Amazonia as a framework that can guide us to receive the entire synodal process. Also, after presenting this, that was another weird line that I felt was kind of easy to interpret as endorsing everything in the final document.
Yeah, that's section 2, right? He says, I've expressed in early documents, and that can help guide us to a harmonious, creative, and fruitful reception of the entire synodal process. And then you said, with regards to the other part, that's in like section 3. I prefer not to cite the final document in this exhortation because I would encourage everyone to read it in full.
Yeah. And the 4th, even worse. Yeah. May the pastors, consecrated men and women, and lay faithful of the Amazon region strive to apply it. He doesn't say don't apply the parts about viri probati and women deacons.
Yep. How do you not see that as a problem? This is not, like when they were saying, this document is a win for conservative Catholics. It's not.
Nuh-uh.
This is and it's right out the gate slapping all of the faithful Catholics right in the face and saying, guess what? And they're like,
this final document that's terrible. You all need to read it and be inspired by it.
Yeah.
I was actually kind of annoyed when he said, I preferred not to cite the final document in this exhortation. I don't know. It was just kind of lazy. That's speaking, solely as, someone that wrote a lot of essays, as someone that's read a lot of stuff. Most authors, when they write something and they want to cite their own work, they're not just going to say, oh, by the way, just read this book. If they have something that's going to aid them in what they're trying to say, they will cite.
Mm-hmm. You're right that it seems weird, and that's why it comes across as kind of suspicious, as if it's like a sneaky way of allowing this document to be promoted without really promoting it.
Yeah. Suspicious is exactly the right word.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of people that are going to be like, trads are always suspicious of Pope Francis. It doesn't matter what he does. But I don't know. I mean, how do you read that sentence about applying the final document with no caveats?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
How else do you read that?
And you can't ignore what he says later on in the document in section 103, right? Where he talks about things like in a synodal church, just for the record, we're becoming a synodal church.
You mean the Anglican church?
Right. In a synodal church, those women who in fact have a central part to play in Amazonian communities should have access to positions, including ecclesial services that do not entail holy orders and that can better signify the role that is theirs.
Can we talk about that? I have a lot to say about that.
Sure.
Or are we going to get back to that?
Well, we can. Why
You
not?
want to jump to that and then jump back afterwards?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of separate from a lot of the document.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
For the record, this
Number
is
one.
a woman. This is a woman speaking, just so people don't think
Yeah.
we're mansplaining right now.
Yeah, this is a woman speaking. When I read this,
She identifies as a woman as well.
Yeah, I also look like one, born as one, XX chromosome. I got all of it.
She look like a man. Just kidding. She doesn't.
Hey, I gotta wax the mustache. I'm growing it out. I'm just feeling kind of left out here. Y'all have beards and I don't. Anyway, okay, so
Sorry, I'm dying over here.
those are two little chin hairs that keep coming back. I just love making my husband laugh. It warms my heart.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, so when I read that, he wanted to give women opportunities and, fill roles that were very specific to women, he doesn't list those. And I'm assuming that he's talking about things that they're already doing. We've heard that, some of them are not necessarily hearing confessions, but almost like listening to people talk about things, talking about lay people administering baptism and whatnot. He doesn't call for those things to change. Now, we know that the only reason a lay person would need to administer baptism is if somebody is about to die, right?
Right. Like if
Correct.
There's no chance of getting a priest there in time.
If there's no chance that a priest would get there in time. So if he's just saying that women should be fulfilling these roles because there's a shortage of priests, that sets alarms going, like, for me. It's allowing them to do that. Like if he's saying that priests are only able to visit, say, once a year, does that still allow lay people to just do baptisms all the time?
Does it say that they're doing them all the time, like as a regular practice, or is that just kind of implied? I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It says in section 101, it says, in this way, we will fundamentally realize why, without women, the church breaks down and how many communities in the Amazon would have collapsed had women not been there to sustain them, keep them together, and care for them. This shows the kind of power that is typically theirs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, you can read that in an orthodox way, but if you know what practically has been happening in the Amazon regions, we know we have reports of like sisters administering the sacraments, doing communion services, things of this nature, and absolutely administering baptism, and observing weddings too, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So like in a state of an emergency, and someone's about to die, yes, a woman could baptize someone. You've explained that. I forget where I heard it, but they did talk about, it was probably sisters that were baptizing people. And I'm wondering, maybe that's what he's implying is these religious sisters.
It's kind of hard to tell, isn't it?
Yeah.
You kind of have to apply a context from outside the document to understand that.
And that's the thing. He doesn't specifically say what he wants the women to do.
No.
Right?
Yeah. He makes reference in section 88 that the Eucharist and sacramental confession lie at the heart of the priest's exclusive identity. But he doesn't really, but then it says, if you go to the footnote, which is 129, it says, it is also proper to the priest to administer the anointing of the sick because it is intimately linked to the forgiveness of sins. That's 3 of the 7 sacraments.
Here's the part that I was talking about in paragraph 92. So the Eucharist then as source and summit requires the development of that rich variety. Priests are necessary, but this does not mean that permanent deacons, of whom there should be many more in the Amazon region, religious women, and lay persons cannot regularly assume important responsibilities for the growth of communities and perform those functions every more effectively with the aid of a suitable accompaniment.
Yep.
What does that mean?
That's so vague.
He also says in 89, in the specific circumstances of the Amazon region, particularly in its forests and more remote places, a way must be found to ensure this priestly ministry. The laity can proclaim God's word, teach, organize communities, celebrate certain sacraments, doesn't declare what ones those are, seek different ways to express popular devotion, and develop the multitude of gifts that the Spirit pours out in their midst.
Mm-hmm. And in the part that I had been referencing before was in 99, where it said that this could happen because of the presence of strong and generous women who undoubtedly called by and prompted by the Holy Spirit, baptized, catechized, prayed, and acted as missionaries.
Yeah. So yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Again, what do you think? Like, how do you read celebrate certain sacraments?
Yeah, which ones?
Yeah. Lay people cannot do any of them except for baptism in states of emergency.
Well, I mean, technically we give marriage to each other, right?
Yeah, but we can't
but it has to be
kind of a stretch to interpret it to mean that, though, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I don't think Pope Francis is making a statement about that.
No, I don't think so either. It's just the vagueness of what, where is the line drawn? And is baptizing people, is lay women baptizing lay people going to become a norm?
Or continue to be a norm with the blessing of this document, at least implied.
Yeah.
No.
So a lot of this is, like we've said many times, you could probably spin it to be orthodox, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's ripe for abuse, and it's like it couldn't be more abusable if it was designed to be abused, right?
No, exactly.
Like, it's got everything that you need to have an excuse for women to do just about any sacrament. Maybe aside from the ones that are called out specifically by Pope Francis as exclusive to the priest.
Yep.
The other thing that I thought was kind of funny, and this isn't necessarily like, I don't even understand it enough to say it's wrong, but it's kind of weird, so I wanted to get your thoughts on it. He makes a point of calling out that women have to have roles in the community that are assigned by the bishop. Did you catch that part? I'm not sure what number it is. It's around those 4 or 5 paragraphs about women near the end of the document. But I found it curious, like, why women are doing all these things, which are not well described, but why is it important that the bishop assign them an official position to do them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was in section 103. So it says here it should be noted that these services entail stability, public recognition, and a commission from the bishop.
Yeah. Why is that given so much importance, I wonder?
Yeah. I mean,
it seems almost like an attempt to give these women things that the priesthood has. Like, obviously I can't prove that's why it is, but I don't see any reason for it.
Yeah.
Feels weird.
It seems like, because they're saying these services entail stability. So it's not just like it can't just be like a volunteer position, right? Like say, your so-called extraordinary minister of Holy Communion at the parish, right? Who comes forward and says, yeah, I want to be involved. We all recognize that that's a volunteer position. They can opt out whenever they want. But if it entails stability, that means they're going to be here for a while. And they're going to be recognized by the people of that community. And the bishop's going to have to say, I officially agree that they have that position. So
it takes on something of the character of a sacrament.
Like somebody administering.
The ambiguity is the scary thing.
Yeah.
Why aren't things specified?
Right.
Why isn't he saying this is what they're doing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what things does he want to encourage women to do? Yeah. Why isn't that there?
I mean, technically a person, like going back to that extraordinary minister example, technically every extraordinary minister of Holy Communion is commissioned by the bishop. But what that looks like in practice is that the priest says, or pastoral minister of the parish says, okay, I've got this list of volunteers. I'm submitting it to the chancery. There's no vetting them. There's no, right?
Yeah. The bishop just signs off with a stroke of a pen and that's it.
Yeah. It's just bureaucratic, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I think it would make all of us more comfortable if it said, the women are helping the poor. The women are making sure that the hungry are being fed. Mm-hmm. Single mothers are being helped with their children.
Yep.
I think it would give me a greater sense of peace knowing what those jobs were specifically, because it's the ambiguity that could be abused.
Right.
It's not that maybe those things aren't all happening. Maybe women aren't officiating, air quotes, weddings or something like that. Maybe that's not happening. I just wish we knew what was happening.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the problem with having a synod in Rome about a region that's, across the globe from them, like they don't have boots on the ground there, and they've got the people that were the talking heads at the Amazon Synod. They weren't people that really had authority to speak. I can't remember what the guy's name was, but I mean, there was protests that they were like, why does this guy get to speak for us in our tribes and whatnot? He has no connection to us whatsoever. He has no idea who we even are. I don't remember who that was, but.
So do you guys want to move on to some other sections of the document?
Yeah.
Sure. Sure. Before we do, just want to throw out, if anybody is looking for a way to support us, we got a message on our Instagram this past week saying, hey, start a Patreon. I'll support you. For the record, we are totally considering a Patreon. But if you hadn't checked out, we have a link on our website at theologyofthebuddy.com. You can see it on our show notes in every episode. There is a link to Tumblr House. Tumblr House is a fantastic proprietor of Catholic books, and they've got fantastic discounts going on right now. With our liturgical breakdown, the Latin Mass Explained book is on that website, and you can buy it there right now, and it's super cheap, and it's a fantastic book. And if you buy through the link that's on our site, you help us out a little bit. So make sure you check out our link to Tumblr House in our show notes for fantastic Catholic goods, in particular books, so that you can fill your mind with good and holy things and not necessarily...
Don't say it.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Okay, moving on. I thought I'd just break that with a brief commercial break so you can look up your information.
Now back to the show.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. So I'm looking at my notes from the doc, and there's really not much until you get into a little bit later. Like, a lot of this is talking about the suffering of the Amazonian people and stuff like that. There wasn't really much controversial for me in like up to at least 17 or so. 18, I thought, was actually one of the better parts of the document, talking about the church's history with missionaries in the Amazon region. It gives kind of a balanced perspective about how there have been abuses and apologizing for the church's role in abuses where they've occurred there, but also calling out the missionaries who have done good work, who have, made converts and who have pushed back against the people abusing the natives in the Amazon and stuff like that. And then in 19, he starts out kind of talking about how the church needs to be committed to that same mission, which is great. It gets a little bit weird near the end.
Yeah.
This quote he puts up that it says, "You are the living memory of the mission that God has entrusted to us all, the protection of our common home." Okay, protecting our common home is cool, but that wasn't the mission that our Lord gave us. Yeah. The Great Commission is a thing. It's to make disciples of all nations and baptize them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I mean, that's the mission. Nothing else is the mission that God gave us.
No.
That's the preeminent mission. So that was a little weird. Just some weird wording there. Just making that sound like it's the most important thing when it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Common home is I learned recently a term that's associated with the whole integral ecology movement. The whole movement for it's basically like ecology, but thinking globally, I guess. Like the integral part is like thinking of a part as part of the whole, essentially. So you care about the Amazon because it's part of the whole earth and it's the lungs of the earth and stuff like that. And this has been apparently a movement through lots of different areas outside the church as well, even though we've heard it mostly from Pope Francis.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed that becomes a recurring theme, and we see this start as a paragraph 20, is the sense of not necessarily changing the Amazon people. It's almost like he doesn't want to say that we don't want to convert them. We don't want to encourage them to change. We don't want them to change their rituals. We don't want them to change how they live. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I know what you mean.
Because it says, hence, without diminishing the importance of personal freedom, it is clear that the original peoples of the Amazon region have a strong sense of community. It permeates their work, their rest, relationships, their rights, their celebration. Everything is shared. Private areas, typical of modernity, are minimal. Life is a communal journey where tasks and responsibilities are apportioned and shared on the basis of the common good. There is no room for the notion of an individual attached from the community of the land. And then he goes on to talk about how their relationships are steeped in nature and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Like, this is the beginning of talking about the people in their habitat, in their land, and that, we don't need to change specifically, he says, their rights.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a problem.
And he doesn't say specifically in that quote, but I see what you mean. Like, he starts talking a lot about the people there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, as you're reading through the the document too. You find out later on in the 70s, essentially, of the document, that there's this understanding that if we are going to approach the Amazon, we have to approach it essentially with a sense of almost like a reverence. That's reverencing the way of life that they have, the rituals that they have. And I think he uses that word in particular, though I'm having trouble finding it. He makes reference to, all of these things that we need to kind of walk in a deep, profound respect for. And I don't know when we're going to bring this up, if we are, but talking about he thinks almost preemptively of our accusations that might fly and say, well, like a lot of these rituals and rites are pagan in origin. And he's like, well, you can't call them pagan. He doesn't tell you why that's the case. But you know what I mean? Like, so it's like he's expecting of the world, because again, he writes the document. Initially, it's, to the church and to all people of goodwill. So like he starts out kind of addressing the document to the world, and then he kind of hones in and says, okay, all right, team, now I want to talk to you about this, and like you can tell at that point, he's like, okay, we really need to love the Amazon and the people and everything there, because there's something happening there that's really good, and we want to be able to protect and sustain it and all of that. But
what are those things?
But what are those things? Exactly. And why are they necessarily good in themselves? Like, why is reverencing a image of, I don't know if Mike was intending on talking about this later, but why is reverencing an image of the Pachamama or Mother Earth, why is that so important for us to be able to respect? Why is that good? I don't feel like that question is ever answered.
That's not something that's called out specifically, but from the context of the synod, it's pretty obvious.
He does talk about, the good things that they do, such as being very reliant on nature for their food, for their shelters, being hunter-gatherers, some of them, how they respect nature and their environment, which, like, let's not say that they're worshiping I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they literally take care of where they live, those are good things. That's fine.
On number 79, I wanted to talk about
I'm literally
what you're saying about
right
the idolatry.
Yeah.
And I was kind of arguing with a guy on Twitter earlier today.
Ooh, you can follow Mike at the Phoenix Tome.
Yeah.
Shout out to your Twitter, Mike. Shout out to your Twitter.
Thanks, dude. I was arguing with a guy on Twitter because he was basically one of the people I was mentioned. And this guy is pretty trad. And he was just saying, like, everyone who's criticizing this document is just, they obviously have an agenda. They've got some sort of idols in their life that they're putting before the church or whatever. And there's no basis for criticizing this. And I kind of responded to him, because I found it so rich that he mentioned idols. And I was just like, well, maybe rather we prefer Jesus Christ and no idols. What do you think of number 79 in this document? That's clearly about idol worship at the synod. And, he told me I need to stop watching conspiracy theories, and I'm just reading stuff into it. But, dude on Twitter, you're crazy. I'm right, you're wrong. And let's talk about why.
Let's just read it for what it says, because I think it's 79.
My My notes on this are one line. It says, as written, it is not false, but in context, it is monstrous. So let's read it.
Okay.
It says, it is possible to take up an indigenous symbol in some way without necessarily considering it as idolatry. A myth charged with spiritual meaning can be used to advantage and not always considered a pagan error. Some religious festivals have a sacred meaning and are occasions for gathering and fraternity, albeit in need of a gradual process of purification and maturation. A missionary of souls will try to discover the legitimate needs and concerns that seek an outlet in, at times, imperfect, partial, or mistaken religious expressions, and will attempt to respond to them with an enculturated spirituality. So, a couple things I have to say about this. Do you want to jump in before I say my thing? Because, okay, number one, you can take this all literally and in the best light and say, okay, it's just about taking benign parts of their culture and not overreacting and saying it's idolatry and stuff like that, and respecting the legitimate parts of their culture. Sure, you could read it that way if this wasn't an exhortation that followed the Amazon Synod. You know, the synod where idol worship took place in the Vatican. It starts off with this sentence about it's possible to take up a indigenous symbol without considering it idolatry. The implication there is, to me, why would it be considered idolatry unless we're taking up something that is an idol, right? I mean, if you take up like some benign indigenous thing, like say some medicinal plant or some tool that they use or the symbol of their village or something like that, or their traditional dress, no one's saying that's idolatry. The only thing people are saying is idolatry is people bowing down on their faces in front of an idol. So is Pope Francis saying you can do that without considering an idolatry? Because that's wrong. That is literally idolatry. Am I wrong?
No. And
what do you guys think?
Like the fact that he goes on to say some religious festivals have a sacred meaning. Okay. And are occasions for gathering and fraternity. Sure. Albeit in need of a gradual process of purification and maturation. So let's say they have a festival to a sun god. It's important for us, because he goes on to say that missionaries need to respond to that with an enculturated spirituality, which I would say, like, no, like you can't have a gradual process of purification. You know, St. Paul didn't walk into the Pantheon and say, like, point to the altar of the unknown God and said, this is the God you're looking for. It's Christ. He's the unknown God. And then proceed to be like, all right, now let's go, and because I want to respect what you're doing, like, let's go and do your little incense to Zeus and give him a little pinch of incense there and a pinch to, whatever. Like, not that Zeus is, who they would be worshiping, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, Boniface didn't go into Germany and say, this sacred oak of Thor is fine. Let's just gradually teach you about, the meaning of wood and how we also have things made of wood. Like, look at this cross we have. And, like, no. He's like, Thor is not real and nothing is going to happen if I chop down this tree.
Yeah.
Let me show you.
Yeah. Because they're like, truth be told, like, I mean, what is the gradual process of purification and maturation of paganism? You can't mature pagan culture and or distill it into Christianity. Like, you might be able to piece some things from it, but that's not real maturation. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, you can distill the good things from that people's culture when you remove idol worship from it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Then you can find the positive things in, the Germanic culture, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are my ancestors. you know?
They are. They are.
I'm here as a Catholic, potentially because St. Boniface destroyed that sacred oak, you know? Praise God that I'm from a Catholic family that goes back, you know, all the way to Germany, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it says too, I don't know if you were finding this as well when you were reading the document, but sometimes you have to almost read it in reverse. So like I found that 79 was definitely like, it could have like followed that 78 could be read after it, because it was saying, let us not be quick to describe as superstition or paganism certain religious practices that arise spontaneously from the life of peoples, right? Whether we ought to know how to distinguish the wheat growing alongside the tares, for quote-unquote popular piety can enable us to see how the faith once received becomes embodied in a culture and is constantly passed on, end quote. Like, let's be honest here. Every pagan ritual that exists in the world arose from the life of the peoples. Like, peoples could also be interpreted as Gentiles, right? From the life of the Gentiles. And, you know, all the gods of the Gentiles are demons, as it says in the scriptures. Like, it's bad.
That's just wrong. We cannot describe paganism as not paganism.
Yeah.
Words actually do mean things.
Yeah. If you start bowing down to a tree, you can call it respect for the earth, but it's a form of paganism. It's a form of earth worship.
Yep. And that's followed up very closely by like the section, the enculturation of the liturgy.
Oh yeah, this was
yeah.
So bad. This is probably the worst section of the document.
Yeah.
Starting from like 78 down through this liturgy section.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I quoted this in my notes as my most hated part of this document.
Yeah.
And it's from 82. It says, we can take up into the liturgy many elements proper to the experience of indigenous peoples in their contact with nature, and respect native forms of expression in song, dance, rituals, gestures, and symbols. It doesn't say it right out, but the implication is all these things, native song, dance, rituals, gestures, and symbols belong in the liturgy of the holy sacrifice of the Mass.
Yep.
It goes on saying, gosh, this part has made me so mad. It says, the Second Vatican Council called for this effort to enculturate the liturgy among indigenous peoples. Over 50 years have passed and we still have far to go along these lines. Cool. So as a trad, immediately I'm like, cool, you guys haven't wrecked the liturgy enough. We need to make it worse. But also, even if you read Sacrosanctum Concilium, where he's referencing in this footnote, it mentions like culture specific modifications of the liturgy, which is already super dangerous, but it's extremely cautious. It's extremely cautious, and it warns you over and over again not to do this recklessly. Well, here we are doing it extremely recklessly, talking about creating an Amazonian rite to include native pagan rituals.
And it should be noted there as well in 82, where he says, over 50 years have passed and we still have far to go along these lines. And then he footnotes and when he footnotes, he says, during the synod, there was a proposal to develop an Amazonian rite. So when he's saying we still have far to go, he ends it by saying, this is the end goal. This is where we need to be going, is an Amazonian rite.
And that's just bizarre. It's just, it's not like he wants to bring the mass to people. You know what I mean? He doesn't want to bring good priests to those people so that they can, be part of the church. He wants to change the mass for those people.
Agreed. 110%. And he actually goes on to basically say that too, right? He talks about the importance of contemplative leisure, which I thought was an interesting word to use. Reading it
contemplative?
Yeah.
You say it all the time.
But he doesn't really he doesn't use it in a Catholic sense, right? And then, but he says how especially the native peoples, the Aboriginal peoples, are familiar with this gratuity and this healthy contemplative leisure. Our celebration should help them experience this in the Sunday liturgy and encounter the light of God's word and the Eucharist, which illumines our daily existence. So the thing, though, again, reading it backwards, right? He's saying we need to make an Amazonian rite so that they can have the things that are important to them in their culture incorporated into the liturgy. Whereas essentially we're basically saying like they couldn't handle the mass as it stands. We have to basically make it something that they would understand.
It's kind of racist, actually, when you put it like that.
Yep.
It's like, oh, they'd be too afraid or too dumb to understand it.
Yeah. Just like they don't get celibacy comment that we had during the synod from that air quotes missionary bishop.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you want to read it backwards even further. It's only 3 paragraphs away that he's talking about taking up indigenous symbols without considering them idolatry.
Like, would they have a statue of, Our Lady of the Amazon beside a statue of Pachamama?
No, they wouldn't put it beside. They just have the idol and call it Our Lady of the Amazon. Yep. That's what they did at the synod. There's no way they're going to do anything different if they develop an Amazonian rite.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And that,
anyways,
and the thing that I don't know if you would appreciate this or not, or agree, but I find that for myself, this is kind of a side note, but going from the Novus Ordo to the Latin Mass, when I think of contemplative leisure, that the traditional Mass lends to that. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm able to experience that contemplative leisure. When I'm at the Novus Ordo, everything is so busy that I don't have time to think and contemplate about anything except what I'm going to say next or whose hand I have to shake, involving songs, dances, rituals, blah, 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 blah. Also, using those rituals is also a dead giveaway that, like, you're going to get something very bad with that. But, like, involving all of that doesn't lend to contemplative leisure. It's just busyness in the liturgy. I don't know.
Yeah. Agreed.
Just my 2 cents.
So all of this is pretty terrible. I wanted to jump back to my absolute favorite part of the document, if you guys are okay with that.
Sure. Okay. Let's do it.
This is legitimately great. It's the best thing Pope Francis has ever written in a document. Number 33, where Pope Francis says all Christians in the Amazon should attend the traditional Latin Mass and learn Latin. Did you catch that part?
No. Tell me.
Let me read it. So, urge the young people of the Amazon region, especially the indigenous peoples, to take charge of your roots, because from the roots comes the strength that will make you grow, flourish, and bear fruit. For those of them who are baptized, these roots include the history of the people of Israel and the church up to our own day. There you go. It's obvious. Pope Francis says, Amazonian young people, take charge of your roots. accept no substitutes for the traditional Latin Mass. That is your patrimony if you are baptized.
Mm-hmm.
There's very much like a segregation between those that are baptized and those that are not. And there's no really any emphasis on trying to baptize those that are not.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny element of this too, but
yeah,
it's kind of passed over.
Well,
yep.
That same missionary bishop that you were talking about from the Amazon, that was like the key player at the synod, said he hasn't baptized anybody in like 20 years or something.
Yeah, and he won't.
Yeah, he doesn't want to.
Because the old ladies are baptizing them.
It's just bad that he so outright says that he wants to change the liturgy to suit paganism, like making allowances for those for bad things to happen. Like, how bad does it have to get before he's like, oh, I didn't mean that, or that I didn't mean those things to happen. I don't know.
That's the real question. I mean, it got so bad at the synod that, like, it's hard to imagine how terrible it would have to be before the Vatican would be hitting the brakes. You know, despite everyone saying Pope Francis didn't allow things like the Viri Privati and stuff like that, I can pretty much guarantee that bishops in the Amazon could go next week and ordain all the married men they want, and the Vatican's not going to do anything. I don't know.
It's true.
There's a high chance we're going to see that happen. Or we'll hear about it in a year or two, how, by the way, they've been ordaining married men and it's been working great.
Yeah.
And then how long before priests and bishops or whoever are saying, well, they can do it. How come we can't?
Yeah. And right at the beginning of the document, it's specifically called out that I'm addressing this exhortation to the whole world.
Yeah.
There's your convenient line to interpret to your favor there, right?
Yeah.
This document wasn't just addressed to the Amazon. It was addressed to Germany too.
Now here's something that I thought of while we were discussing. Sorry, why are you laughing, Chris?
There
was a moment Mike and I shared there. It was
just cute.
Yeah. It was a little dig at the German synodal path of heresy and apostasy.
So we know that in some cultures, they have appropriated the use of things like voodoo practices and associating that with Catholicism.
Right.
You mean like in Mexico?
Yeah. Mexico, places like New Orleans.
Haiti.
Right. Haiti in particular. Yeah. Any Haitian culture has a lot of that.
I was thinking of the, what's the Day of the Dead type stuff in Mexico.
Yeah. I wrote that down because that's one thing that, but that's those two things looking at side by side, like voodoo people or people that practice voodoo will try and appropriate their culture, quote, quote, with Catholicism. But that's not okay.
Or integrate, you mean?
Yeah, integrate. That's a better word. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I had to say on that.
It's bad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Making allowances for those that would be doing various rites and rituals that are Amazonian and perhaps very, very dangerous are no different than those practicing things that are of voodoo nature with Catholicism. It doesn't work. And they do not belong together, regardless of what culture those practices, quote, quote, are coming from. Mm-hmm. That's just a concrete example.
That is how I read every time they say an enculturated spirituality. That's how I read it. Yeah. I don't see like a concrete way of them saying like, we are going to give them the Catholic faith, the deposit of the faith, and allow them to kind of understand it through the lens of their culture, through the lens of their experience without change or alteration. That's not what we're speaking. We're talking about mixing the two together. One of my,
that is syncretism.
Yeah. Like listen to this line. This is from section 56. On the other hand, if we enter into communion with the forest, our voices will easily blend with its own and become a prayer. As we rest in the shade of an ancient eucalyptus, our prayer for light joins in the song of the eternal foliage.
Enough said. That's not enculturated Christianity, guys. It's not.
No, this isn't the Catholic faith. And, we're not here to tell you, how you should feel and whatnot with regards to Pope Francis, but we can legitimately look at this document and say, there is so much wrong with this that Viri Probati and Mary Deacons were the least of your problems. Earth worship, entering into communion with the forest, we don't do that.
No.
We don't do that. We can't enter into communion with something that has literally no soul. That has literally no immortal soul, that is not, sanctified by the gift of baptism. We don't have communion with anything except with God. Yeah. This bothered me. I was like, you go on later on and talk about the importance of Holy Communion, but you can't say that and also say this, 20 paragraphs previously. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I just don't know what to say to that.
We agree with him when he talks about ending human trafficking, when he talks about ending exploitation of people, ending drug trafficking, ending poverty, ending homelessness. We want that everywhere. We also want an end to abortion, which happens there too, and infanticide, which happens there too. We want that to stop everywhere, but we do not agree on changing the liturgy to suit paganism.
And even to a degree, we also agree with I would think that we all agree. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I think the exploitation of all the natural resources, I think that there is a just way of going about that. We don't necessarily believe that we should just be going in there and doing a scorched earth kind of thing. And, and one of the things that I guess I learned a little bit about the Amazon, according to the document, is that the soil is not incredibly rich in the Amazon. So things grow on top of the soil, not in the soil. So if you do uproot a lot of things in the Amazon, you'll never get it back because you can't grow as much there. I don't understand how that works. To be honest, I'm not an ecologist, but I'm like, okay, so we just be smart with what resources we're taking out there. But again, we're talking about two things here. We're talking about the exploitation of the earth, and we're also talking about inserting pagan rituals into the sacred liturgy. Yep. Two different topics, and
one is billions of times more important.
Yeah. Well, one is good, one is bad. One is an important topic for a certain part of the world. One is just blasphemy and apostasy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And again, why an apostolic exhortation had to be written about this, I don't understand. The commentary is that they were using a synod kind of thing to push an agenda. And after reading that document, I have to agree. I don't necessarily see it as something that provides anything really concrete that supports the people there. Yeah, it's oh, you know what? I'm sorry for the abuse that happened there. And we really need to stop human trafficking and all of that. But we're not providing anything to them. We're not providing any aid to them. The bishops of the world are not going to comply and provide their very minimal numbers of priests to that Amazon region. That's not going to happen. The Holy Father hasn't created a non-profit to go and stop the human trafficking in the Amazon. Yeah.
Yep.
What's the point of throwing paper at it?
The point is the second half of the document. I have to conclude. The point is the changes to the liturgy and having grounds for allowing lots of other stuff like women deacons and stuff. Yeah.
And a push for eco-spirituality, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, everything there is what I've heard pushed from the wacky pantsuit nuns of the last 60 years. All those orders that you see dying around the world, they all take up the importance of integral ecology. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we've pretty much said all that we need to say.
Yeah, we don't want to beat a dead horse anymore.
No.
It might start to resemble some kind of enculturated ritual.
Especially if that horse has Amazonian features. You don't want that to happen.
It's a horse with many faces.
Oh, that was weird too. A church with many faces?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was weird.
It reminded me of that character in Neverending Story 2 where his hand had the blockhead and it like spun around in different faces. Yeah.
Isn't it called like modalism when they talked about like the different masks that God wears?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Like the Trinity has 3 different modes of being.
Modes of being.
Yeah. And I have a feeling he was talking about more like, different faces of like people, like different ethnicities that make up the church. But I thought that language was very, very strange.
Yeah. I don't like it.
Okay.
I don't like it. It makes everything feel weird.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we took a detour from our originally planned liturgical breakdown. So that's going to come next week.
Yep.
And we're going to continue on that. Again, please follow us on social media where we love to hang out and share the faith with you. Check out our stories on Instagram. They're fun. Thanks again to everybody who's followed us recently in the last few weeks. It's actually been awesome, especially in Instagram world. A lot of people have followed us. So huge shout out to everybody.
We love you.
Follow. All right. Well, from all of us here at Theology of the Buddy,
stay trady.